Good morning. Let us get started. Today, I want to talk about the water resources management situation from the Palestinian point of view. So last week we spoke about Israel, and just to summarize these
Good morning.
on how Israel has successfully
I want to
closed
talk
the
about
supply and demand gap.
the water
It has
resources
done that
management
through intensive
situation
investments
from the
in
Palestinian point of
what we
view.
would call, right, non-conventional water. The most important one has been the huge increase of desalination, seawater desalination, which has put us into a position where today roughly 70% of Israel's domestic water is coming from desalination. So the water that we are drinking, the water we're using for sanitation, is basically now not being dependent on natural water resources, but from water that we're actually manufacturing from the Mediterranean. The other way in which Israel has improved water management is on the agricultural side, with the treatment of wastewater and the reuse of that wastewater in agricultural production, where we are now at around 50%, roughly 50, maybe 60% of the irrigation water going to food production, not coming from fresh water, but coming from recycled wastewater. So those two policies, desalination to produce more water and wastewater treatment and reuse to manage water better in agriculture, has allowed Israel to decouple itself, to disconnect itself from the variability of natural water, whether it be the Sea of Galilee as our surface water supply, or the mountain or coastal aquifer for groundwater supply, whether or not those resources are impacted by droughts, climate change, right? Israel is no longer dependent on them as the primary source of water. We still use that water, of course. We would still prefer to use that water because it's the water of the highest quality and it's the cheapest water to provide, but we are no longer dependent on them as we once were. So even though we remain, and we will even increase our scarcity portfolio, let's say scarcity profile, if you will, because those natural resources are only going to get scarcer over time, we are not actually dealing with a water scarcity problem anymore because we have overcome that through technology. All right, now, of course, that comes with many caveats. Most specifically on the desalination side, there's the cost of desalination, which means water today in Israel is expensive, and we, the public, have to pay, right, as well as all other water users. So the price of water has risen because desalination is expensive. And the second issue with desalination is energy, because we need to have a large amounts of energy to power these facilities. And the energy that Israel is most dependent on for this is natural gas. Natural gas is still a fossil fuel. Natural gas is still contributing to CO2 emissions. So there's a strong linkage between desalination and energy. And the third aspect of desalination we need to be aware of is the brine discharge back into the sea and whether or not that is going to contribute to any kind of long-term ecological damage on the marine environment. Those are caveats that we have to manage versus the benefits that desalination is providing to us. On the wastewater side, the caveats are mostly in terms of water quality, in order to ensure that the water we're using to irrigate our crops is safe. It's not going to create public health concerns to consumers or is not going to create pollution in water or soil. So the water quality aspect, the continued monitoring of residual contaminants that are not being removed from wastewater also is an issue of great importance. So these technologies have been hugely successful, but it's not to say that they don't come with their own challenges. Nevertheless, Israel, we can argue, is no longer a water scarce economy. But what does this mean for our most immediate neighbors, the Palestinians? That's what we want to be discussing today, okay? So, first and foremost, just some background, okay? and some comments on language. This is not a linguistics course, but language is important because, especially now with the war, right, words have power, and words, of course, have meaning beyond the simple word itself, because it's all in how it's interpreted. So let me just say a few words about this because I think it's important. When we use the word Palestine, what are we actually trying to convey?
Gaza and the West Bank.
No, less the West Bank and more, it's more Gaza than the West Bank because
Both of those answers are
Wrong.
no, not wrong exactly. No, not wrong exactly. But when I say Palestine, what am I trying? What message am I trying to say? What am I trying to convey?
that there's an existing place.
That's it. That's the point, right? When I say Palestine, or when people say Palestine, they're basically conveying that there's a state, but there isn't one, right? But that's what Palestine, when we say Palestine, when there is at the UN General Assembly, the state of Palestine is there. It's part of the General Assembly, right? So when we say Palestine, it's really much of a political term, okay? But what is Palestine in reality? Okay, well, Palestine in reality are these territories, West Bank and Gaza. So if I wanted to relate to the territory, right, then Palestine is maybe not the best word to use. So what do I do? Do I just say West Bank, Gaza?
Yes.
All right. Do I say occupied Palestinian territory? Do I say Palestinian Authority? Do I say Judea and Samaria? Right? Whatever I'm saying, each of those terms are all conveying a certain political position. For example, if I say Judea and Samaria, I'm basically saying that this is part of Greater Israel, right? Because Judea and Samaria are the biblical terms for these territories. If I'm saying occupied Palestinian territories, I'm referring to the fact that these territories, West Bank and Gaza, are under some measure of occupation. If I'm saying Palestinian Authority, what am I referring to? I'm referring to the organization, the institution that is in charge of managing the affairs of the Palestinian people. Okay? So all of these terms are looking at this issue in a slightly different way. And it can become very confusing. Okay? So when I'm saying here Palestine, I'm referring to what potentially would be the sovereign state of Palestine. And that sovereign state of Palestine is made up potentially of these territories, these geographical places, these physical entities of what is known as West Bank and Gaza. Okay? So those territories together are roughly 5,700 square kilometers of land, plus around 200 square kilometers of water. Where's the water? The coastal area of Gaza, but also the eastern border of the West Bank, which makes up the Jordan River and Dead Sea. Okay? Israel, on the other hand, is just over 20,000 square kilometers. I think we had a slide last time that said 22,000 square kilometers. And the most important point here in this slide is this, right? The separation of Israel as a sovereign state with these territories which are not sovereign is determined by an armistice line, what we term the green line. And it's really important to understand that these borders are not political borders. They're borders that were delineated according to a cessation of hostilities, a ceasefire, but not the outcome of an actual agreement saying here's Israel and here's Palestine. Now, what I find interesting is that the war that we're fighting today is in essence a continuation of the war that we were fighting in 1948. That war never ended. It never ended because there wasn't an agreement. The fighting stopped because of a ceasefire with the states of Lebanon and Syria, right? Egypt and Jordan. Remember, back in 1948, there was no Palestinian anything. So what we are dealing with today is, in essence, there was a 75-year ceasefire, which Hamas broke when they invaded Israel on October the 7th. And the war started again. For example, when, please God, the war does end, it's not going to end in a treaty, in a peace agreement, right? I think we all know that. So what will bring us to an end of hostilities? Another ceasefire, which may redraw the borders, especially in Gaza, because Israel is going to insist on some kind of a buffer around Gaza. Okay, so this is part of the problem that Israel and the Palestinians are facing when it comes to the water question. This is not, as we discussed already in class, from a transboundary perspective of a country thinking about how to manage water with another country. This is not the Nile River Basin, all right, which has its own massive complexity. But the major difference between what's happening in the Nile and nearly every other transboundary situation we can think of is in, what is going on? Is in the, who's listening to us? Oh my God.
They heard you.
Yeah, big brother. Damn it. Now I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Yes, the major difference here, which makes the Jordan River system unique and challenging, is it's a transboundary situation between one state and one non-state actor. And so all of the processes and the ways in which we understand how to resolve transboundary water do not necessarily apply in this context. And so we have to think of other ways of how to potentially solve this problem, okay? So it's really important to understand that from the get-go. You all with me? Any questions?
It's not even one non-state actor, but multiple.
Well, now, of course, because, for example, we are certainly seeing now at the end of this war, who is the person on the other side that we are speaking to, right? Is it Fatah? Is it Hamas? Who is it, right? Who is it going to be? Okay. And I think the next couple of months are going to be hugely challenging in terms of how all this is going to hopefully get resolved. Okay? And the water question is going to be critical, especially for providing immediate relief to the Gazan, the Palestinians of Gaza that had no connection to anything, the civilians that have been caught up in this terrible conflict. So this is the point, right? This is the point. The international boundaries between Israel and Palestine have never been settled. The green line refers to the boundary established in the General Armistice Agreement that was signed, and here we're talking specifically in the West Bank, but there was a similar agreement with Egypt for Gaza in April 3, 1949. Right? That is when all of this began. And it continues today. Now, today, of course, we don't, or you hardly hear anybody refer to the so-called 1949 borders. People are referring to what is called the 1967. But the 1967 borders are the same, I shouldn't say borders, the 1967 line is the same line as the 49. But why do we say 67? Because it was at 67, after the end of the Six-Day War, that we were talking about not a separation between Israel and Jordan, or Israel and Egypt, but rather now the Palestinians. Because at the end of that war, that was more or less the beginnings of understanding that whatever was going to be the future of these territories, it wasn't that these territories would return to Jordan or to Egypt, but that there would be some entity coming up, which would be a Palestinian entity of some sort. Okay, and that's more or less when people talk about the two-state solution. The two-state solution is Israel, and then these areas delineated according to this line, which would be the Palestinian state. Okay, but it's important to understand it goes all the way back to the beginnings of the state of Israel. So what water resources are we specifically talking about for these areas? Okay, and it's really all about the fact that ever since the territories of the West Bank and Gaza, since 1967, have been controlled, occupied. Again, here the words again are really important depending on what we use. That access to surface water from the point of view of the Palestinian population is zero. And the lion's share of the waters of the Jordan, mostly of course being pumped, as we've discussed already, from the Sea of Galilee, is being used by Israel through the national water carrier. Now, yes, today that is no longer correct because we are pumping less out of the Sea of Galilee and making the difference from desalination. But Israel still controls this surface water body. And so, from the perspective of the Palestinian population in the West Bank, they do not have any access to utilizing the Jordan River system, even though the eastern border of the West Bank is delineated by the river. Okay? So it's important to understand this situation that surface water is not a resource that is accessible for Palestinians in the West Bank. And so it all comes down to groundwater. This is the only resource both in West Bank and in Gaza that is available for the Palestinian population in these territories.
This presentation in the model because I couldn't find this one. I think the last one was for.
I don't. No, you're right. I don't think in the break I'll put it on the Google. Okay. I must have forgotten to do it.
No,
I suppose. No. It's my, you're right. Don't worry. I'll make sure it's there. So let's look specifically, and again, we've discussed this somewhat already because Israel, of course, uses these groundwater resources as well. But in this map, you see it quite clearly from the perspective of the West Bank. So firstly, that red line is the line that we discussed already. That is the national water carrier, all right, which was providing a significant amount of water for Israel until desalination came along in the early 2000s. And also, it's also an important source of water for Jordan, which we'll discuss tomorrow. But what you see here, firstly, this is the line. This is this 1914. If you go to Google, it says there, 1949 line, okay? 67 is not actually the line, the name. It's the 49 line, all right, there it is. And you can see that the entire territory of the West Bank, right, overlies this mountain aquifer system. And the mountain aquifer system is delineated or divided into three sub-basins, which are determined by rainfall. These are what's called the hydrological divides of the groundwater based on when rain falls, to which direction will the water flow once it percolates into the soil. Either it will flow westwards, which is making up what is called the western aquifer system. And you can see a significant proportion of this western aquifer system is in Israel proper, right? And so Israel has been using this groundwater ever since its founding, right? This is the eastern aquifer, which is flowing into the Jordan River and Dead Sea, right? Which is completely within the West Bank. And then there's a smaller section called the northern aquifer, which flows northwards. So if we take this as one aquifer unit, it's a transboundary aquifer, but it's a transboundary aquifer between a sovereign state and a territory that is under dispute, a territory that is not yet clear what its future will be. Okay, but for the Palestinians, as we will discuss as we continue, this is the only source of water that they have access to. All right, now in the case of Gaza, right, we are talking about the Gaza aquifer, which is a continuation of the coastal aquifer that runs along the Mediterranean. So here too, there's a transboundary element between the coastal aquifer, which is being utilized in Israel, and a continuation of that we call the Gaza aquifer. Now, this Gaza coastal aquifer is heavily impacted by overpumping that can contribute to seawater intrusion. Because of the proximity to the coast, if you overpump the aquifer, meaning that the water table is dropping, and you're not managing your pumping with recharge from rainfall, then you're going to encourage seawater to pull into the aquifer. And that seawater is, in essence, a source of pollution because it's salinizing the groundwater. We're going to get to this in a second. In the case of the mountain aquifer, right, this is actually the best quality water of any of the natural systems because of the very, very good filtration process of rainfall as it moves through the geologic layers into the aquifer. So if we would be able to choose which would be the best source of water to use in terms of quality, the best quality water is water that is mostly within the western aquifer area because of the very good filtration process of the geological layers that literally filters out naturally contaminants from rainwater. Okay, obviously the west aquifer or the eastern is also it can also be overpumped if we do not manage pumping with rainfall. Okay, with me, everybody? So the groundwater basins, oh shit, right at the screen. Came back in. Okay. So from the perspective of this territory that we call the West Bank, right, delineated by this line, that is the extent of the natural water resources. And you notice that most of it is actually the eastern basin. The problem is most of the population, Palestinian population, is actually within the western aquifer. Right, the large Palestinian cities, mostly in the north of the West Bank, so Nablus and Tulkarem and Qalqilia and Jenin, right, is mostly in drawing on waters from the western and northeastern basin. The eastern aquifer is mostly utilized for agriculture in the Jordan Valley. So Jordan Valley, which runs along the Jordan River, is an area of very, very intense agriculture, where the primary water is the eastern aquifer, whereas in the western basin primarily and in the northeastern basin, the use of that water is mostly for domestic use. Okay, and again, the western aquifer is also heavily utilized on the Israeli side. But this is just showing the groundwater map, if you will, within the so-called line that constitutes this territory, that is a territory that is disputed in terms of how do we define this territory? Okay. Okay, so let's walk through this. This is an attempt to try to understand how complicated the management of this territory is, and this brings us to the process of Oslo. Now, this is timely. Because if you're following the news, at least the Israeli news, Oslo has resurfaced, not as a good thing, but actually as one of the worst things Israel could have done.
The Oslo Accords?
Oslo Accords. Yeah. Right. You know, if you follow what Bibi says, Bibi's like, we're not returning to the days of Oslo. Now, what was this whole idea, right? In the early 90s, right, the government of Israel began to enter into a process of negotiation with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, and whose head was Yasser Arafat. Now again,
Arafat is like
what?
probably one of the worst individuals that has ever existed.
Maybe yes, maybe no, but he was the leader. He was the leader of the PLO, and the PLO, again, to understand, is it is not a government. It is an organization that is representing the interest of the Palestinian population. So Israel enters into a series of negotiations, discussions, if you will, with this non-state entity. And the purpose of these discussions was to gradually provide a process of autonomy to the Palestinians, right? Because prior to Oslo, Israel, the government of Israel, was responsible for the lives of the Palestinians in these territories, which means Israel was responsible for their healthcare, for their jobs, for their education, for infrastructure. And Israel wanted to disassociate itself from this, saying, we rather want a Palestinian to come in and for them to take control of the lives of the Palestinians living in this territory. So Oslo was structured to begin to provide gradual autonomy to the Palestinians, which would eventually open up a pathway for Palestinian statehood. So the PLO and Israel began to discuss how to delineate this territory where the PLO, which then created the Palestinian Authority, the de facto government of the Palestinians. And the question was, which areas within the West Bank would now be under the control of the PA and no longer under the control of Israel, okay? So the crux of Oslo, is the way I define it, the way I understand it, wasn't about territory. It wasn't about which specifics of this territory would become Palestine. It was more about Israel being able to divest itself of control over the non-Israeli population in this territory. You with me? You following? Okay. So all of this is, again, determining what is going to be the future of this territory delineated according to this armistice line of 1949. And this led to the fact that most of the Palestinian population, 85% of it, is living in only 18% of the territory of this West Bank, and this has been delineated as Area A. And Area A is where the Palestinian Authority that was created by the PLO as the de facto government of the Palestinians is the authority in these regions, right? So the outcome of Oslo was that autonomy was granted to only 18% of the territory of the West Bank. But within that 18%, more than 85% of the Palestinian population lived in that 18%, which means from the perspective of Israel, it was a good deal because Israel was now no longer responsible for the lives of 85% of the population of the Palestinians in the territories. You following, everybody? All right. Now, most of the Palestinian population, right, is in the north. So you can see the heights of these shapes. The higher they are, it connotes the more population. So the center of most of the population of Palestinians is in the north area, and that connotes again the areas of Nablus and Jenin. Mostly not, and some other, but mostly those two cities. So the northern section of the West Bank is the section that has most of the Palestinian population of the West Bank. Then, of course, this is Ramallah here. This is the Hebron area here. That's Jericho over there. Okay? So this is what connotes Area A, the 18% of the territory that is now no longer controlled by Israel. It is controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Okay? You following everybody? What?
I'm a little bit lost.
Okay. Let me try to unloose you. What? Alexa, what's the question? What?
No. It's like no question. I'm just lost.
But I don't want you to be lost. You have a question? Can I help? Should I continue and then you might have a question? Okay. The second aspect of this Oslo process was to say we are going to then define areas of this territory that we are going to define as Area B. Now, all that orange bits and pieces is Area B. Now, what is Area B in reality? Area B are the rural areas of this territory where you have mostly small Palestinian villages. Now, this area was something of a gray zone. And what I mean by a gray zone, because the agreement said within these areas of Area B, which constitutes 19% of the territory of the West Bank, are areas that the Palestinian Authority will provide civil service. So again, in any services like healthcare, education, security, employment, right, is under the control of the PA, just like it is in Area A. However, unlike Area A, Area B, the overall security remains in the hands of Israel. So Area B has civil authority in the hands of the Palestinian Authority, but overall security remains in the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces. Unlike Area A, where the IDF is not controlling the security, it's the Palestinian Authority through their police force. Okay? You following? Are you even more lost now, Alexa?
No.
You okay?
And these numbers are still like that now, or?
These numbers have not changed in over 25 years. When I say numbers, this proportion
Exactly.
of this division of the territory. Are you all with me, everybody? Okay?
The division of A, B, and C, like those areas, happened when?
In the 90s during the Oslo Accords, which was around 95. That was when this map was negotiated and agreed on.
And Baraka settlements.
Rega.
What was the difference between having an area controlled by the IDF and an area not controlled by the IDF makes to the water issue?
I'm going to get to that too. I just firstly want to get you to understand how this territory is divided into these different jurisdictions. And of course, then we're going to discuss what it means from the water perspective. Okay. So we have Area A, which is the territory that is under Palestinian control, both civil and security, including the majority of the Palestinian people. Area B is this buffer zone, if you will, where the PA maintains civil control, but overall security is in the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces. And then finally, as Dalia just said, we have Area C. Now, Area C in the blue connotes 60% of this territory. And in that 60%, Israel,
Reminds
what?
the
Oh,
screen just because
sorry,
it's hard to read.
sorry.
Yeah.
This,
Yeah.
sorry. Let me just slip it up there.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so Area C, which is 60% of the territory, remains under the full control of the Israeli Defense Force. Now, Area C is 60% of the territory, which means that from the point at which Oslo was negotiated and agreed to in 1995, we are now 28. Is that correct? How many years away are we? 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, 28 years. We are hitting 30 years soon, right? 28 years. This map has not changed, right? Now, the settlements, the Israeli civilians that are living in this territory all live in the area demarcated as Area C. And Area C is under the full control of the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, there are small pockets, if you will, of Palestinian communities that live in Area C, but they are very small and scattered, and a lot of them are Bedouin populations and living in very, very small communities. Now, what does this all mean from a water perspective? All right. This map, as you can look at it, is a complete and utter nightmare because it's a mishmash of different jurisdictions, Palestinian jurisdictions, Israeli jurisdictions, areas where there's some kind of a combination. Okay. Now, the areas in Area C, when I say under the control of Israel, what am I actually meaning? It's not the Israeli government that controls Area C, right? The Israeli government, even today with a severely right-wing government, the West Bank, or what they would call Judea and Samaria, is an area that remains under occupation. The only thing that would convert from the eyes of the government, this territory of Area C, from not being under occupation, is to annex Area C to the state of Israel. If Area C were to be annexed to the state of Israel, then under the concept of annexation, the Israeli government would have full jurisdiction over this territory. This is what Israel did as an outcome of the 67 war in the north with the Golan Heights. When Israel captured the Golan Heights from Syria, right, in the late 70s, early 80s, it made a decision to annex the territory to the state, which means from the eyes of the Israeli government and from the perspective of the Israeli legal system, the territory of the Golan Heights is an indivisible part of the state of Israel, which means Israeli law applies to that territory. Now, that annexation of the Golan was able to be done in part because it was an area that was very sparsely populated. Now, of course, Syria and the rest of the world do not acknowledge this annexation, but in the eyes of Israel and the Israeli government and pretty much most of the Israeli public, the Golan is Israel. Now, one of the reasons why Israel did not do the same with the West Bank was annexation of the territory of the West Bank would have been annexation of nearly 3 million Palestinians, which would have to then be made full citizens of the state. And this is one of the major problems and why Israel is not rushing to annex, even though certain people in the government will be delighted if Israel did this, is that it would change irrevocably the demographic nature of the state. Okay, so that's what Oslo was trying to avoid. What Israel wanted, it wanted its cake and it wanted to eat it too, right? It wanted to have maximum control over the territory, but minimum control over the people. And that's what this map represents. It represents that the Palestinian Authority controls the lives of the people in the areas of Area A and somewhat in Area B. But Israel maintains control of the lion's share of the territory. Now, it's within that area C that most of the groundwater is. In other words, to access, this is getting to Anna's question, to access the groundwater, the most suitable access points for laying pumping infrastructure lies within intelligent area C, which is that the outcome of this process was that Israel also maintained within area C control over the water resources, both for the needs of the population of Israel, both within Israel and within the territory, and also having overarching control over the water resources being provided to the Palestinians in area A.
And they know about this.
Of course they know. That's how it is.
So,
So for example, Alex, let me try to put this in like real. If I am a person working within the Palestinian Water Authority, right, which was created as part of the PA, and somebody comes to me and says, listen, we need to provide a water well, source of water for this neighborhood in Hebron. They need water. And we've done the survey, we've identified that the best location to pump the groundwater is in this area. We've done our geological studies, we've done our hydrological studies, the water's there, the water's good, all the engineering studies have been done. The water is available. This is the best place to pump the water, to provide for this neighborhood itself, 10,000 people. Right? So the PWA says, here's the plan, there's the water, this is how we do it, right? But the PWA is not able to follow through with this plan if that source of water is in area C. Under that situation, now here's where it gets complicated. So if you were confused before, you're going to be more confused now. Because what happens under Aussie? If it's in area C, then Israel has overarching authority over what happens to the water. So the Palestinian Water Authority, right, has to contact the Israeli water and say, listen guys, in Tel Aviv, just down the road from the university, that's where the offices are. Okay. Morning. Okay, they have to contact them and say, listen, here's our plan to provide water to these people. The Israeli authority looks at the plan, and it will be up to the Israeli Water Authority to approve the plan. And this mechanism is what's called the Joint Water Committee. Under Oslo, they created these committees of where the PA and the Israeli government would work together to manage these kinds of things like water, wastewater, energy, solid waste, roads, all the stuff that you need to manage life. So the Palestinian Water Authority prepares the plan. They submit the plan to the Israeli water authorities, and the Israeli water authorities look and they study and they go, and it's up to them to sign off. In other words, approval of this plan cannot be done independently by the Palestinians. It has to be done with the sign off, with the approval of the Israelis. Now, that process often leads to no problems whatsoever. The Israelis say, we love it, great plan, go ahead, permission, approved. But oftentimes, it's not that straightforward. Oftentimes, the Israelis say, whoa, hang on a minute, wait a minute. We're not so keen about this because we think that this is going to create a situation of overpumping or all kinds of problems that they discover, and they say, approval denied. In other words, even though the Palestinian Authority has control over the people, doesn't have control over the resources to provide for the people. The control over the resources, the water, is still determined by Israel. And again, I don't want to say that lots of projects happen. It's not like Israel is not, proving things. But from the perspective of the Palestinians, they have no independence.
We don't know.
They have no independence. They can't decide on their own to use the resources from here or to do what those decisions can only be done collaboratively, if you will, or with the sign-off of the Israelis. Now, what complicates a lot of this is, from the perspective of Israel, the territory of Area C also is the territory within the territory that includes all of the settlements. Now, the estimates today, and the numbers are always controversial, but the estimates are that today there are close to 400,000, 500,000 Israelis living in this territory. Now, they need water too. They need services too. Now, the same authority that is responsible for providing water or agreeing to water projects to give to the Palestinians is the same authority that also will approve providing water to the settlements. And this authority is called the civil administration. And this, hang on, Alexa. And the civil administration is an arm of the Israeli Defense Force, because the overall sovereign, if you will, of Area C is not the Israeli government. It can't be, because for the Israeli government to be sovereign of Area C, you talk about annexation. So the army is the government, and the army governs Area C through the civil administration. Now, because this is part of the army, everything that the civil administration does is viewed through the prism of security. So when the Palestinians say, hey, we're going to do this project, this is what it's for, this is how we're going to do it, the civil administration is the body that will approve it. Now, oftentimes, when things become super complicated, is when the civil administration looks at this plan, they go, we like this plan. We want to give, we don't want to make these people's lives unhappy. They should have water. It's all good. We think it's a great plan. However, we also can see that this project can also service this settlement. So the Israelis go back to the Palestinians and say, guys, we love it. We want to go ahead and do it. But we also suggest that when this project is done and the water is flowing, you're going to get the water going this way, and we are going to send this water to this settlement because they need water too. And at this point, the Palestinians say, no. Because at this point, from the eyes, again, if we are looking at this from the perspective of Palestinians, this is a red line. Because what does this mean? It means Palestinian infrastructure is supporting the settlement enterprise. And from the point of view of the Palestinians, that cannot happen because that is de facto acknowledgement of Israeli sovereignty and occupation. And so oftentimes the friction is not about the water or the project, it's who gets to use the water. So then the Palestinians say, no. And then the Israelis get upset. They say, but why are you saying no? You're going to get water. You're going to benefit. Why are you saying no? And the Palestinians say, you know why we're saying no. Because the civil administration, which is the de facto sovereign of Area C, says, but we are responsible for the 400,000 Israelis living here. We must provide them with water. And so it's through that level of complexity, if you will, that the approvals of projects that would make people's lives easier is very, very, very complicated. And this is partly why this fragmentation of this territory into these jurisdictions makes any rational, logical, straightforward engineering projects massively complicated. And this is why there is so many problems in water. It's not because that there's actually maybe water scarcity, right? It's not about the actual resource itself. It's the fact that you've got competing jurisdictions that have different political interests in whether or not a project is going to move forward or not. And the real tragedy of this is that at the end of the day, everybody loses. Because if the project is not approved, the Palestinians don't get the water that they need, right? And the settlements will most likely get the water from elsewhere because Israel has other ways of providing water to settlements, including connecting them to water infrastructure in Israel itself. For example, Gush Etzion, the big settlement block around Jerusalem, is connected to the Israeli grid from Jerusalem. But the settlements around the Palestinian areas like Bethlehem, which is the big city somewhere between Gush Etzion and Jerusalem, is not connected or has to find other ways to get water. Or the villages around that area. Okay? Alexa, you want to ask a question or okay? So this sorry, last word, sorry. This is just showing you how exceptional this situation is, and there really isn't anything comparable anywhere else in the world that has this level of complexity. Okay.
I just wanted to ask if part of the authority in charge of the water information system joined event. It's like experts from the world or like there's
yes. The committee, the Joint Water Committee, I have slides later on that will get right. The Joint Water Committee is a committee of experts. Remember, yes, last time we spoke about one of the successes of the Israeli management approach was that water management decisions are not politicized. Well, here it's very different. So the people that are sitting in this committee are the technocrats, right? And this is partly actually why it leads to problem, because they're technocrats. So there's a project and they say, okay, there's a population here and there's a population here and we need to provide them with water. They don't say these are or let's say they don't look at it this way, maybe. Is that they don't say these are Palestinians and these are settlers. They say these are people and these are people and they need water. And here's the project, let's give them water. Right? But the Palestinians, even though they're also technocrats, cannot operate them because it's not people and people, right? In their eyes, in the Israeli eyes, people, give them water. Why would you say no? Right? But the Palestinians don't look at it. Now, of course, obviously the Israelis do know that it's not just right, but they say our job is to provide water. That's our job. Our job is not to deal with anything political. But for the Palestinians, everything is political. And it frustrates the Israelis. Because they're like, but if you say no, you are not getting water. We want to give it to you. Why are you saying no? And they know why they say no. Why are you saying no? But the Palestinians have to say no. And so it is this simple reality, which I have said before. You cannot, under this scenario, separate politics from water. You know, they say oil and water don't mix, right? Well, in this case, water and politics mix maybe too much. Mm-hmm. All right? Yes.
So one criticism I've heard of the Israeli control over water in the territories is that they don't allow any individual sources of water. They fill like this is like videos go around online of them, like the army like filling wells with concrete and preventing any sort of individual water resource. They also do that to Bedouins, in which is a big contradictory thing that people within Israel don't get proper water usage, but then settlers on outposts do, which is again criticism.
Yes.
So idea of sovereignty you're talking about with water, you have no control over your own water resources. The Israeli are, like you say that they're not trying to be political, but they are intentionally taking away sovereignty in any way they can. So it's Palestinians use water collection because that's the only way they can have individual water.
Right.
And like you said, you understand why they have to say no, because if they admit sovereignty to the Israelis, that they have control over it. This actually, when I was in Hebron a few years ago, I was in the middle of a riot there, actually at the cave of the patriarchs, because Israel was trying to build a accessible elevator, right? Which in theory is a good idea, would be for both sides. But they were upset because if they allow it, then it shows the control over the Israelis.
Exactly. No, you're right. And
So I thought it was funny because it's like why they're rioting over this, and I was in the middle of the riot. It was a whole other thing, but I ended up on the Arab side of the fence for 3 hours.
The classic.
Got smoke grenades thrown at me, but
Okay.
I understood why they were getting upset because it is the idea of control, even though I thought it was kind of a silly thing to get upset about. But water is water, like you can't.
right now, so why is what? Right, you're right. So when you see these cases of Israel coming and destroying water infrastructure, whatever. So from the perspective of Israel, these are projects that were done without approvals. They were not approved to the Joint Water Committee. So from the eyes of the Israelis, you, Mr. Ari, went and did something without any permit. You operated illegally. And so our job is to enforce the law, and we come along and we say, you can't do this, Mr. Ari, and we take your project away. Okay, now the Palestinians look at this, of course, as an act of aggression and as an act of maintaining Israeli sovereignty, because the Palestinians will say, but you are not approving projects for us. So what are we supposed to do? In other words, this is a big argument that the Palestinians say, that we know that there's no permits, but we need the water and you're not approving projects, so we have to take the water and do it ourselves, right? And Israel says, you can't do that because under the law, every project in Area C has to be permitted. So the Israelis will go to they say to let's say the Bedouin, and they say, look, Mr. Bedouin, you want this well, apply for a permit and we will consider it. And the Bedouins are like, well, they're Bedouins. They're like, look, the whole process of them applying for a permit is a politicized process of some kind of acknowledgement of the occupation, right? And of course, it makes good social media, and the army comes, and that doesn't help either. But this is what's happening all around, and so again, it comes back to this situation that unless some alternative to this fragmentation of jurisdiction is achieved, water access is going to be massively problematic. And to add to that, the demand for water in this territory is growing because the populations are growing and the water is becoming scarcer because of climate change. So it's a problem that is only going to get worse unless a complete reassessment of this territory is considered. Now, one alternative is convert all of that into Palestine, right? Which is what the Palestinians want. But converting all that into Palestine means what happens to the settlements? What happens to the 500,000 people that are not Palestinians, right? Well, the Palestinians have the answer. You're putting in your people illegally. They need to leave, right? Then all the settlements need to be dismantled because all the settlements are illegal. So that's one scenario. The scenario that goes all the way is that Israel takes over everything. But then again, they'd be responsible again for 2-3 million people, which again would, in essence, create a hugely massive, probably unsolved problem for what will be the civil status of these people. All right. Now, between that scenario and that scenario, what's a third scenario?
Not giving them one.
No, the third scenario is that the state of Israel no longer exists, and instead we have one state. The lines are completely erased, but then by erasing those lines, the state of Israel, as a state defined as Jewish and democratic, cannot exist. Those are the three scenarios. Okay? Is there a fourth? Is there a fifth? People talk about federation, people talk about confederation, people talk about lots of ideas. But at the end of the day, this situation is untenable.
Current situation.
This, yes, which is this. What's the alternative? What will the future be? I have no idea. All that I can say from a person because actually yesterday I was there working in the Jordan Valley. The current situation, as delineated by this insane map, is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. It's not, from my perspective, it's not in Israel's interest to make this the de facto, a permanent situation. And the Palestinians will never accept that this is the permanent situation. They'll never accept it. So, because of that, this overarching political complexity, these basic simplistic engineering decisions of how to provide people water is simply not possible, right? Okay, so this is the summary, right? We've got this fragmentation with Area A, full Palestinian civil security control. Area B, full Palestinian civil control, joint Israeli-Palestinian security control. It's really Israeli security control, really. And Area C, as you can see again, 60% is full security control and civil control by Israel.
Why Arafat accepted this and the Palestinians accepted this kind of scenario in the first place?
You to ask him. To dial up to heaven. It's a good question. But it's important. I don't know why they agreed, but the point is they agreed. They agreed. The PLO agreed. So it's important to understand that, right? This is not Israel doing what Israel wants to do on its own. The Palestinians signed Oslo. They agreed to this. Now, I think maybe what led to them agreeing was that Oslo was presented as an interim agreement. That the outcome of Oslo was actually the beginnings of the establishment of a state of Palestine. Because the Oslo process was only supposed to last for 5 years. So maybe that's why they signed it, because they would think, okay, this thing will get us to, but of course, Oslo collapsed with the second intifada. And since that time, which is going back 20 years now, nothing has come to replace it. No, and of course, since 2000, of course, now, the sides have simply, become more and more and more estranged. Today, because of the war with Gaza, there is zero trust, but like zero, between any entity in Israel in the government and any entity in the Palestinian Authority. Now, it's all just like, kill. It's all emotions, it's all rage.
The security establishment, which still does the work.
The civil administration, but the civil administration doesn't make policy. So they're just acting out on the orders of, right? So, during the time of Oslo, there was real optimism for a peace agreement. Now, there's no optimism anywhere. Now, that might not necessarily be a bad thing. And why am I saying that? Because Oslo has clearly shown not to work. but what the war, Hamas has shown, at least in my mind, is that there must be an entity of Palestine. There has to be. I think the Israeli public actually has figured that out now. That, we simply can't live together because they're going to kill us and we're going to kill them. So we can't live together. They must be here and we must be there. So that actually may be the point at which negotiations will start at the end of the war, is that there will be some entity that will not be under any control of Israel. What that entity will be, what it will look like, who will be in charge of it, I have no idea. But it actually may be exactly what will lead us to moving out of the Oslo phase, which has gone way beyond its due date, which was 5 years, stretching up to 30 years, into something new. What it'll be, maybe President Biden knows. Maybe we should ask him. I don't know. Okay. Now, I want to go into this a little bit more deeply, where I want to also illustrate for you the settlement reality. All right. So what you see here, again, is the green line, that armistice line of 1949. And the only area of the West Bank that was actually annexed to Israel, which is the area delineated in purple, that is East Jerusalem. So the only annexation that Israel did at the end of the Six-Day War was to unite Jerusalem. And that unification meant not just unifying the city territorially, which actually I think is a good thing, that there's one contiguous urban space, but it also meant that the Palestinians living in East Jerusalem had to be granted civil rights akin to Israelis living in Israel. The Palestinians of East Jerusalem have full civil rights as all Israelis, except for one essential element. They do not have Israeli citizenship. They have rights to work in Israel. They have rights to get healthcare in Israel. They have rights to insurance, Bituach Leumi, national. They have all of those civil rights. But the civil rights that they do not have is they do not have the right to claim or to ask for Israeli citizenship. So Palestinians in East Jerusalem are their status, because they are living in this territory that is now annexed to Israel, is unlike the Palestinians of the West Bank. Because the Palestinians of the West Bank living under the Palestinian Authority do have no civil rights within Israel. Their civil rights are controlled by the PA. Okay, so a Palestinian in East Jerusalem holds a blue ID card just like me, or like some of you, okay? But they do not have the right to claim citizenship. They are not able to hold an Israeli passport. So if they travel overseas, they still have to travel overseas with a Jordanian passport that is issued to them from the Jordanian government as a Palestinian. So this is exactly the conundrum that would face Israel if they annex the entire West Bank. If they annex the entire West Bank, it's not going to be a few 100,000 Palestinians in Jerusalem that would have to be granted some kind of civil right. It will be now living 3 million people. And this to me, me as a South African saying this, would then make Israel an apartheid state. Why would Israel be an apartheid state? Then, not now, then, is because if you do not give equal civil rights to the population, you're creating an apartheid reality. These people get citizenship, but these people don't. But they're all living in one country. Well, that's apartheid, right? And that is a road the Israeli government is not going to go down, although they wanted to. Well, there are enough Israeli politicians that actually say, "Well, what's wrong with apartheid? Let's go." All right.
Separate but equal. We can do that one.
Right. So this is why the West Bank remains under this cloud, this cloud of disputes. Right. Now these are the Palestinian built-up areas. Okay, this is where a lot of the Palestinians live. But these are mostly the areas within Area C in which you have the rural Palestinian villages. Now, again, if you traveled around the West Bank and you have visited Palestinian communities outside of the large urban centers are extremely rural. And here's where the water question comes in again, are economically highly dependent on agriculture, which means it's all about water. So these communities, which are spread out all over the world, and notice mostly towards the west, which means that the water that they need is coming from the western aquifer. And these are mostly small Palestinian farming communities. Okay, these are small Palestinian farming communities, okay? And so they need water for agriculture, but that is a part of their economic, what's the time? We'll just finish the slide and we'll take a break, okay? So they're under Israeli restriction and control. Now here in the blue, you have the settlements. Now notice how intertwined the settlements are with the Palestinian population. So if we're talking about a state of Palestine, which connotes the entire territory, and the state of Palestine says no settlements can be allowed, how would you practically get rid of it?
Well,
Do you have an answer, Emma? Please, I'd love to hear, because I don't know.
I mean, not to, toot any horns or bring up
Shoot away, go ahead.
experiences, but isn't that exactly what Israel did to the Palestinians who were living in locations where they wanted to create settlements?
I understand. So I'm not sure.
Well, you're saying if we're gonna make this as Palestine.
Oh, yes, okay, yes.
There's settlements, well, with looking at the history.
During the war, though.
No, I'm sorry, but regardless, kicking people out of
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Kicking people out of their homes, Israel did it to the Arab.
You mean at the beginning of the 48 war?
Yeah,
Yeah,
is this a suggestion that we should just switch the Nakba around and redo it, except the Israelis are the victim?
Yeah, no, I please, back up. What?
I mean, I understand what you mean, but isn't that the Nakba created where we are now? It's
Exactly.
some part, so.
It's what, and it's what?
I mean, so,
The Nakba is part of the reason why we're in this situation.
yeah, it's a lot of pain, a lot of resentments, and yeah, I just cannot see how another Nakba for settlement.
Again, it's
You're on two, electric boogaloo.
yeah.
Push them out.
Let's
Do it.
So look, again, I don't have the answer. My suggestion, again, if anybody,
I think we should just elect.
isn't that from the 80s?
Yeah.
I think we should just elect Google them.
Yeah,
If anybody, my suggestion, if anybody bothers to ask me, right, and nobody is, but
Care.
my solution would be to avoid a reverse Nakba, let's say, is to say, look, within the sovereign state of Israel, 20% of the population is Arab.
Yeah.
And they're Palestinian, they're ethnically Palestinian, and they have full civil rights. They have passports, right? So the argument that I would say is the following. If the state of Israel, the Jewish democratic state of Israel, can have 20% of its population non-Jewish with full civil rights, why can't the state of Palestine have 20% of its population being non-Palestinian with Palestinian civil rights? In other words, why must the Jews be kicked out?
Because
What?
people hate
No, I'm
no offense, but
I get it. I'm not saying that this is going to work, right? But it's an argument that why must the Palestinian states have no Jews living in it? And you know what? I would add to my argument like this. if I was the Palestinian government, I would actually want these people to become citizens. You know why? Any ideas?
Yeah, creates a more peaceful.
No, forget about peace.
They don't care about that.
You don't care.
They don't.
Why?
We're not gonna wanna fight them because.
No. Why? What's the
So
benefit?
actually give status to the.
No, let's say the Palestinian government, the state of Palestine says, we are going to say, nobody has to move. Nobody's getting kicked out. All settlements in the territory of the state of Palestine will receive Palestinian citizenship.
Oh, because most,
The water
well,
access.
like if you think about it, most people who live in the settlements don't want to be Palestinian.
No, let's assume.
They don't
Just
have, they
assume-
have the resources.
My question is, why is this good for the Palestinians? Why should the Palestinians do it?
PR.
No,
PR.
I see. Why? Why is this beneficial for the Palestinian state?
It's beneficial for Israel for that
No. Why?
And also the natural resources,
Which
like
Israel
they
has
have
to
to
do
share
the
the
same.
water and it's better for the Palestinians.
Guys, you're not getting. What's the answer? Again, in my opinion,
Palestinian men get rights over the what? Like,
the simple answer is this. In my mind, right? Why would let's say I'm going to be the future Palestinian Prime Minister. Say, all Jews in the state of Palestine, you are all going to be given full rights. I'm not saying will they agree, will they won't, forget all about that. Okay? Why is this in my mind, why is this the right thing to do? Because those people that will then be granted Palestinian passports are the ones that will be paying most of the tax to the Palestinian government. Why? Because they've got all the jobs. They're making all the money. And that is revenue for the government. The way you do this like this, you say, look, you all now will have a Palestinian passport. And you know what? You'll have dual citizenship. You will be given Palestinian citizenship and you will still hold your Israeli passport. So you're not giving up Israeli citizenship and you keep working in Israel. But now you're not paying tax to the Israeli government. You're paying tax to the Palestinian government. Thank you very much. Now, again, I'm in no way saying that this is ever going to work. But if I was a Palestinian, I would say to the settlements, here are your options. Option one, get up and leave. And the Israeli government will have to compensate you. You don't want to be part of the Palestinian state? Ahlan wa sahlan. Good luck. Go live somewhere else. And the Israeli government must compensate you. Option one. Option two, adopt Palestinian citizenship. In addition to your Israeli citizenship, stay in your settlement, keep your jobs in Israel. Your kids still go to Israeli schools. And the only difference that you're making is you are paying into the Palestinian taxes budget and not into the Israeli one. If I was a settler,
I would not want to do that.
I don't know what I would do because, okay, but the question is, that question is not being asked. The Palestinians are saying, and I think they're wrong, again, this is just not me talking, if you want a Palestinian state, why kick out the Jews? Why do what all the other Arab states did when Israel was founded? Why kick out the Jews? Because they are the ones that are the most economically productive. Now, again, it's not to say the settlers are going to agree, because, right, again, this is completely hypothetical. But it's an argument you could offer, because from a geographic, physical perspective, how would you actually make this happen? And I think, therefore, the Palestinians are making a mistake by insisting on 0 Jews in the state of Palestine. You're actually giving all the excuses to Israel to say, you see, they don't want to, right? I think it's a mistake. But again, I'm not Palestinian, I'm just me. Okay, yes.
Two questions. One is, I thought we said that the rural communities were mostly going from the eastern river, and more like.
No. Sorry, I'll rephrase. Sorry. Most of the eastern aquifer is for agriculture, but let me maybe requalify my statement. But this is for large-scale, big farms.
So there's not like people living there.
And that's the entire Jordan Valley, the population is less than 10,000. If I don't include the city of Jericho, okay? So if you travel the Jordan Valley, you see huge farms. So the water consumption is massive, but it's not really providing for people. It's providing for very large industrial-based size agriculture. All of these little gray pockets is small, farming. A lot of it is subsistence-based farming, so it's a completely different scale. Sorry, my fault if I did. It's a completely different scale of agriculture.
Gotcha.
You with me?
Yes. And then the second question is for the Palestinians living in East Jerusalem who cannot hold an Israeli passport, what differentiates them, or is all that differentiates them the fact that they live in that area? Like
Yes.
from about the 20% that are in Israel?
No. Okay, so let me qualify that statement. When I say that 20% of Palestinians that have Israeli citizenship, it's not the Palestinians living in Israel. It's Palestinians living anywhere else in Israel.
Correct, but what is the pathway for an East Jerusalem Palestinian to become an Israeli citizenship, or is there not?
No, there is a pathway. I actually have friends that have done it.
Yeah.
It's extremely bureaucratic and it's extremely traumatic, because if you choose to apply, there is a pathway. If you choose to apply for Israeli citizenship, you automatically will be denied any claim to Palestinian citizenship. The Palestinian government says, you want Israeli citizenship? We will then cut you off from any kind of Palestinian citizenship.
And what are the benefits of being a Palestinian?
A lot.
Being able to visit.
It's a good question, because they're Palestinian. I mean, so why do most Palestinians not follow this pathway? Because for them, it's saying, I'm giving up the struggle. I'm adopting, I'm acknowledging up. Now, some have done it. I know people personally that have done it. And why have they done it? Because then they get full rights. And then let's face it, an Israeli passport is something valuable, because the Palestinian passport is not even a passport, it's a travel document.
Israel wants to get out,
So a lot of Palestinians simply say,
Are they not allowed back into the church?
no, they can move around, but they then are removed from the Palestinian population registry. And again, it's a political act.
Right.
And most Palestinians in Israel will not do that, because they themselves don't accept East Jerusalem as part of Israel. For example, this is why ever since East Jerusalem was annexed to West Jerusalem, Palestinians have steadfastly, and I think something to their detriment, have steadfastly refused to vote in municipal elections in Jerusalem. They boycott. They say, we don't recognize these elections, even though they legally can vote in municipal elections, which is sort of ironic, because the population difference between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem is roughly equal, which means if the Palestinians did vote in municipal elections, they could potentially elect the mayor, which Israel would have to accept.
There was someone running.
Yes, but they're under so much pressure that they always drop out. And I think
This one hasn't yet, but
it won't happen. I
Palestinians.
know. Every year,
you don't talk about it.
How do the Palestinians travel abroad?
if you're a Palestinian in the West Bank and you have to travel abroad, all Palestinians in the West Bank have Palestinian passports, but because they don't represent a state, it's considered to be a travel document. But in addition, they also have Jordanian passports. So if I'm a Palestinian and I want to fly abroad, I have to leave the West Bank with my Palestinian documents, and then when I arrive at a foreign airport, put that in my pockets, and I say, here's my Jordanian passport. And then I fly
So
to
they
Jordan.
cross to Jordan to take,
Yes.
use their Jordan airport.
Yes, that's right.
Like they don't go to wherever.
They can't go to Ben Gurion, no,
Why not?
because Israel won't allow them, because of
They
security.
started with
No, it's cool.
Americans, right? What was the
No, that's the visa waiver for Israelis to fly into
US?
the US with no visa meant that it's the question of reciprocity, which meant that any Palestinian American who's visiting Israel and or the territories has to be allowed to do so without any overly taxing security thing from the Israeli side. And Israel has agreed to that. Let me just finish the slide so we can take a break, okay? So the settlements, what you can see here is that Israeli settlements are completely distributed all through the territory. It's not like they're focusing on one area, which of course if they were focused on one area, then you could practically say, okay, let's move these people out. But because they're living everywhere, it's very difficult from a physical point of view to think about how you would actually do that, okay? Now, this area of Area C that is all colored in that red color are areas that the Israeli army considered as closed military areas. This is where no people are allowed to live, and these areas are maintained by the army. And notice that it's mostly, again, in the eastern aquifer system.
Like, can Israelis live there?
No, nobody.
No, okay.
Nobody. This is closed military zone, no access.
Nearly 30.
No access, no access. Okay, so that is a significant proportion of Area C that is in the eastern area, and that's mostly, of course, because of its proximity to the border with Jordan. Okay? Then you also have nature reserves. So these areas also do not allow for any human settlements. Okay?
Can people go into?
And then you have, I mean, but you can't, right? You can't live there. You can't make use of the reason. Then you have what's called state-owned land. Now, this is hugely problematic because what is state-owned land? State-owned land means that there may have been people living there, but they were driven off or they moved off or they're no longer there and there's no legal claim to the land. So when you can't make a claim like a property right or show any kind of legal documentation that you live there or you lived there, then this land is taken over by the state. They say there's no entity that we can acknowledge that owns this land, and so the state.
But which state?
But
Israel?
The Israeli state.
Because it's inside of Area C.
Yes, this is all. What I'm showing in this slide is how Area C actually looks like.
Okay.
Right. So another area that is off limits to any kind of human activity is the state-owned land areas, and so what is left in Area C that could potentially be developed in any sense is that gray bit. Now again, this, guys, is Area C. Look how complicated this is. Okay, and I can tell you, when you travel around the West Bank, you ask people the Area C, A, B's, and people are like, I have no idea. Right? I mean, the maps are clear, but on the ground, you sometimes can literally, that you could, this foot is in Area A and this foot is in Area C. It gets to that level of sometimes being somewhat ridiculous, okay?
Who made these up?
This was all under Oslo, is all, okay? And then finally, what has subsequently happened as a result of the second intifada is the separation wall. And the separation wall, of course, is not a physical barrier that is creating a de facto border between Israel and this territory, right? Because you can see in lots of places, it follows the green line, but in lots of places it dips into the West Bank, right? And of course, that means is that Palestinians are outside of the area. And notice one of the times what the separation barrier is trying to do is to incorporate as many of the settlements which are close to the green line onto the western side of the barrier, okay? So this is what is today the so-called state of play of this territory. Okay, let's take a break and we'll come back and talk.